Hi, welcome to Empowered Spirit Healing. My name is Paula, and today I have the beautiful Brice with me. How are you going, Brice?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thank you. So today we're gonna do some chatting about the Law of One and Todd's interview that we did or I did last week, I believe, and we've uploaded to the Academy, which is really, yeah, it was really, really good. Very, very interesting. But we did have some little issues, didn't we, with some what they called negative
Negative
readings.
greetings.
Yeah.
Yes, that's part of the law of one material.
Yes.
It's, yeah, that when you like a negative greeting would be shadow banning, right? Would be like are getting sick before you're supposed to teach a really important class, or
Or
the
issues with the
things that,
camera.
yeah. Or like when my when we're talking about something potent and my equipment goes out or the audio goes out, that would be a negative greeting.
Mhm.
It's anything that the darkness is doing to try to put an obstacle in your way to stop you from releasing certain information that can help people.
Mhm. And the Law of
Or
One is incredibly helpful to people, isn't it?
yes, or it could be because he talks, as Todd said, the Cassiopeians with that he talks about a lot in Law of One kind of are they're two separate things, but they're kind of one. They're the same template. And a few weeks ago, I don't know if I even put this up on. I might have just talked about it because usually when they drop the Cassiopeians drop a reading, I'll put it on my channel. Um, there was a reading where one of the guys asked, "Are we about to enter the golden age?" And the Cassiopeian said no. And the guy kind of went pessimistic with it. So as Todd was like, he must have had a negative reading before hearing that information, because just because we're not, according to the Cassiopeians, we're not going into a golden age does not necessarily mean that it's going to be bad. And the
Mhm.
more Todd and I talked about it, the more it made sense because we have to see the destruction of the matrix
Yes.
before we can rebuild it. And that's what we think the Cassiopeians were saying. Like you
Mhm.
can't leapfrog ahead to the happy ending. We have to go through the
No,
friction.
yeah. And
And
I
that,
think we have to actively participate in the rebuilding and we have to
yes,
learn and experience what works and what doesn't. Because we
that,
can't just magically just if we just magically appeared in the golden age, we would have learnt nothing. We need to actually think, okay, we need to, create more environmentally better products and we need to, just conduct businesses in a win-win situation instead of a few rich people right at the top and everybody else is struggling down the bottom.
absolutely. And that's kind of so just because we're not going into the golden age just yet, there's going to be friction doesn't mean that friction is bad.
Mhm.
Look at what's happening in the United States right now. The whole, the Doge reports and all the lists, will say the lists that are about to be released.
Yeah.
This is going to cause a lot of heartache for people, especially those that aren't as aware as we are of what's been going on in the world.
Yeah.
So as far as like the collective consciousness, this is going to be, we're at the point of labor and delivery. Like this is you pushing the baby out. Like this is painful. And but it doesn't mean that it's not leading to a to think that we're going to go from Trump gets in office, all this, and then we all of a sudden boom into a golden age is very naive, as you were saying,
Yeah.
because think about when you're a child and you're learning how to tie your shoe. It takes a few times to learn how to tie the shoe so that you don't trip on your shoelaces, right?
Yeah.
And so if we were just handed the golden age on a silver platter, gold on a silver platter, we would be like spoiled little rich kids. We wouldn't
Yeah.
know how to or how, and that's my biggest thing too. Like I've said so many times, it's really something special because I think I'm hated by the normies and the truthers both alike because it's really something special to see um, when we realize like the media was not being honest with us. How
Yes.
many people realized that, but then went straight to YouTube and Rumble and Telegram
Yeah.
and did the same thing.
Yeah.
Just listen to what people were saying,
Yeah.
talking
And
heads
I
were
did
saying.
that for a while.
I was guilty of that until I started realizing because of the law of one, because of the
Mhm.
yoga training, that this wasn't making sense, what they were
Mhm.
saying. So I had to pull back a little bit and go, wait a minute, this is not good. And I think so many people, and that goes into the law of one, like if you expect somebody to do something for you, then
Yeah.
that's service to self.
Yeah.
That's service to self. That's not service to others. You have to be able to take it. Now, with that being said, like when I did my before the we'll say the competition, because I know the E word gets a little dicey on YouTube, but the competition that happened back in November in the United States, everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
There were a lot of talking heads on these platforms saying, "Oh, you don't need to like basically
Yes.
VOTE. You don't need to
Yeah.
participate."
They're just saying
Yes,
just
you
be
do.
neutral. Yeah.
No, yeah, because the law of one actually says if you go neutral, if you decide to be neutral, you're going negative. There is no
Interesting.
such thing as being neutral.
Right. I mean, probably on a spiritual level, in a higher dimension, everybody's probably quite neutral, but we're still in the third
Choice.
dimension. Yeah, we
We're in the
have to
dimension of choice.
we're still human beings and we have to physically make a choice. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you go neutral, it's like if you see somebody beating somebody up on the side of the road and you decide not to intervene, you just watch and not intervene, you are then allowing the person doing the beating up to continue to beat up. Does that make sense? So when you go neutral, so people who weren't going to give their participation into the competition, going to VOTE, it doesn't matter if they were going to try to cheat and change what you gave your intention behind what you wanted. And that's what counts spiritually.
Yeah.
Which they didn't cheat because they couldn't cheat. That's a whole other topic. But that's why there was such a landslide victory. And so this template of the law of one, and I think Paula, like I started talking about it on my channel, and I was telling Todd, I was like, you realize like how many people that you've helped because you introduced this to me and I spoke about it on my channel.
Yes. I mean, look, I'm one of those people that you helped because it wasn't until I was listening to you and you brought up that, we should be questioning who we're following and not just blindly just listening to people and trusting everyone. And I just, yeah. And then I started to realize that some people I was listening to, it just wasn't really resonating very much. But it's funny, it just kind of hearing it from you saying it, it just kind of gave me permission to kind of be like, I mean, not that I need your permission to do anything, but it just didn't even come to my awareness until you brought it to my attention. And then it was like, oh yeah, we can't, just because it's a truther community doesn't mean everyone's being honest. And
Yep.
it didn't really occur to me until I was listening to you saying that on your channel. And I was like, oh wow, like yeah, we do need to have discernment and trust our gut to as to what people are telling us. And to be honest, I'm still struggling with that a little bit. There's a few people I do like to listen to, and I like some things that they're saying, and some things feel a little bit off, but I'm like, it's the whole person off. It's very confusing. But one thing I would really love to know is what for you and Todd, what kind of stood out with the Law of One information and the Cassiopeians that kind of differentiated them from other channels and other channel readings?
Well, first of all, it made sense.
Mhm.
And if you read the Law of One, I think Todd even mentioned in your interview that Ra, when they're doing the Law of One, Ra keeps trying to get them to ask more about the negative path.
Mhm.
But the people who were writing it thought that that was bad to ask about the negative path, but Ra can't. Any type of good entity you're working with or good teacher cannot intervene with your free will choice.
Mhm.
And so, and the Cassiopeians are like sometimes the Cassiopeians are very vague in their answers, or sometimes they just won't answer because if they do answer, it's going to take away your free will choice.
Right.
And that's a big indication of something that's on the side of good, is
Okay.
they're going to allow you to make your mistakes. They're not going to interrupt your karma.
Mhm.
And with the law of one, I think for me, and I can't actually even remember, Paula, I cannot remember when Todd first started speaking to me. I was trying to think about when was the first time he actually taught. I can't remember. Like, I can't remember when that first thing was, when he said, hey, this law of one, negative, positive polarity, all this kind of stuff. But it just made sense. And the more and he said something very important in your interview with him that I think everybody should know is that we need to understand the service to self side.
Mhm.
We need to understand the dark side, not to be able to practice that, but to have our wits about us,
Yes.
to have our, to, the the Cassiopeians always say knowledge is power, knowledge protects, and knowledge is infinite. So let's talk about this. Like he hit on a lot, and this is what really, as a human being on this planet, like it was more a desperate cry for me because I don't want to go down with this sinking ship, right? Like our planet Earth is destined, and they don't use the word destined. So let me back up. They say probability, which
Yeah.
I actually prefer that word,
Mhm.
probability, because I think for us, we hear fate or destiny or prophecy, we think that it's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah, and then we can
And
get a
that's
bit lazy. Mm.
yeah. When you say probability, though,
Like,
you
oh,
know that there is still a chance that things could change depending on our behavior. And so the probability of Earth going positive, going fourth density positive, is high,
mhm.
but it's just a probability. And so for the negative side, for the people, the entities, the beings, the souls that want to go negative, for them to hijack a planet that's probability is to go positive empowers them more.
Yeah.
So if a 40 negative being can hijack a person who is going positive and turn them negative, it's like having a nutritionally dense meal
Mhm.
versus junk food. So that's why the darkness is trying so hard to wrangle Earth negative because it's a high gamble, but the payoff is huge for them.
Mhm.
Now, with that being said, I wanted to say that just to kind of back up what I'm about to say here. So a lot of these so-called truthers for many years now were saying that the bad guys were already
Yeah.
caught or had been or capitulated,
Yeah.
surrendered to the good guys. So basically, what they're trying to get you to do is to stop fighting so that they can hijack this earth.
Mhm.
Because if you understand the law of one, and Todd even said that with you, just as we have a moral compass on our side, so do they.
Yeah.
So do they. So to capitulate or to surrender is service to others.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not going to do that.
No, because
They
then
are
that would be
not.
beneficial to us. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Hmm.
not going to do that. If anything, they might turn on other people in their group because there's no honesty among there's no loyalty amongst thieves, right? In for their own self benefit. Like I am very, even though I really like what Elon is doing right now, I'm very distrustful of Elon. Like I have some hesitations with Elon. I'm willing to be proved wrong, but
Hmm.
part of me thinks, did Mr. T come to him and say, I have all this information on you.
Hmm.
You can either help me, help humanity, or we can arrest your ass.
Yeah.
So at that point, because if he serviced to self, he would have been protecting himself
Hmm.
and going with Trump. So he's not really capitulating. He's saving
He's
himself.
doing what's most beneficial for him. Yeah. Hmm.
I don't know if that's true or not. So please don't,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
guys,
I
I could
mean,
be totally wrong
it's,
about Elon.
yeah.
Elon could be a really great guy. I'm very happy with what he's doing now. I'm not, but just to kind of give you guys an example of what could
Yeah.
to understand the intricate like what's actually at play here.
Hmm.
Now, to be service to others, you have to be 51% service to others. So on the good side, 49% of you can make mistakes and you can be an asshole sometimes. Like that's the laws of forgiveness. You just have to be 51%.
Hmm.
The core of your being has to be like an empathetic, compassionate person. You want good for the world.
Yeah.
To go negative though, you have to be like 94, 95%
I know.
service to
That
self.
blows me away. That's actually really hard.
Hard to go service to self. So the people in the establishment will say, the Aluma Shmati, they pick the harder path.
Yeah, they really
That's
did.
why they go so diabolical.
So,
That's why.
do you think there's a possibility that on a spiritual level they could actually be higher souls? No?
I
Okay.
mean, they're also, in order to make a choice to go, you have to have a soul.
Yes.
So they do have souls, which is hard, I think, for people to comprehend.
Yeah.
Um, so people like Hillary Clinton, I think she has a soul. She's just made her choices. It's
Hmm.
because it's a planet of choice, right? And I think that's some things that like the Christians also have a hard time with is that This realm of third density is for both. It's for both.
Mhm. Yeah.
You have to make a choice for yourself because this is the realm. It's like being in a supermarket and you're seeing all the options, and now you have to make that choice.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people will be making those choices on a subconscious level. Like they might not know about the law of one, but they're making choices inherent to what they naturally feel is right.
Mhm.
I think Todd even spoke about that with some of these families, that they're raised in this environment. And so that's what they think.
Mhm.
So unless they have like a moment of prativa, as we would say in Sanskrit, a flash of illumination where they decide, I don't want to do this. I want to, like some of the whistleblowers. So, and literally the higher densities, it's your choice. They're not going to try to stop you. Make that choice.
Yes.
Well, and that same thing goes you know, I actually spoke about this yesterday for one of the courses that we're about to drop, with Desikachar, the son of Krishnamacharya, talking about how yoga has been around for thousands of years. And he says, this practice is time tested. It's time tested. So we know that this works if you let it work.
Mhm.
When we look at some of these newer channelings, and I'm getting to this too. That's why sometimes I'm very more hesitant with newer channelings. First of all, it's not time tested. Second of all, within the template of the law of one, higher density beings, we might call them angels, demons, whatever vocabulary word we have for those higher density beings, the ones who are on the side of good will rarely talk to you.
Mhm.
They'll
Yeah.
rarely, because they don't want to interrupt your free will.
Yeah.
The
They're
only
just
time
there
they
to
will,
support.
yes, and the only time they'll come in and intervene is if you ask them to.
Mhm.
You ask them to. And I was even talking with Cindy about this on Friday about the darkness, the dark beings will always intervene because they want you to give up your free will. That's the side of enslavement. They want you. So they're always going to try to dupe you and trick you
Yeah.
into thinking that they're entities of good, right? And Cindy said, I forgot how she says it, but she says when she's doing her work and a being enters, she always asks, "Are you here under unconditional love or something like that?" And they
Oh.
have to answer,
Mhm.
and that's when she's able to differentiate between, are you here to support the client I'm working with? Are you here to try to derail this session? Are you
Mhm.
here for unconditional love?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because they can mimic the light, the
Yes. Well,
darkness
I
can.
I usually say, just to only have beings that are going to contribute that are for the person's highest good or for my
Yeah,
highest good or whoever. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
But
So you
that's
have to
good.
be very
That's good to ask that.
careful. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they think they're channeling, they are channeling, but I think they're channeling from a darker entity to try to derail people. And we see it a lot with like the and that's the one thing that kind of got me too from my yoga background. In the practice of yoga, Ram Dass talks about this all the time, and so does it. You're trying to actually be a nobody.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's kind of what you're coming to this place of being a nobody, of just being,
Yeah.
not you're everything and nothing at the same time
Mhm.
when you're really in that practice of yoga, and that brings that humility. And I see with a lot of these like more newer channelings that it's all about how fabulous you, the individual, are.
Yeah.
And that's concerning. Not saying you aren't fabulous.
Mhm.
You're everything and nothing at the same time. But when you get yourself so brain, and I think that's the problem with kind of the truther community too, is that there's become this arrogance
Yeah. I mean,
of I
they're a
know
great ego
more.
boost when you listen to them.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
make
like
you feel
I'm
like
so
you're so
smart.
special.
I figured it out. I'm so smart, blah, blah, blah. And so when you move into that place of arrogance where the false sense of self, the ego is taken over, you have a harder time seeing your blind spots. You have a harder
Yeah.
time having discernment. And I think that's the problem with a lot of the truther community is that they now have a hard time admitting when they could have been duped. But if you always stay in that level of discernment or humility of trying to be nothing, nobody, you're constantly in a place of having, Jessica chart, in order to be, that's why I think so many people reject traditional yoga. Jessica Char spoke about this and instead go to these like 200-hour fake ass teacher trainings. Because to be a student of traditional yoga, of real yoga, you have to have a level of humility.
Mhm.
You have to surrender to your teacher. And I was telling you, I was recording yesterday for our course. I got so emotional because it just brought back everything, the hardness of India, but how I wouldn't trade it for the world because of what it did for me on a personal level. And, a lot he talked about at the Krishmacharya Mandiram in Chennai. I go to the one in the KBGI in Mysore, same thing. He talked about how like 20,000 people at that point had walked through that door, all with a unique, different story. Some people were fighting illness. Some people were massively depressed and suffering. Other people were trying to just do a deep dive study of what the soul is, unique experiences of people. And everybody in that position was in a place of humility because they needed help. They needed guidance. And with a traditional practice like yoga, you have to be, in order to even walk through those doors, you have to be willing to be yelled at, screamed at, get your butt kicked, cry in front of people, look like an idiot in front of people, because that's what it takes. And so many people nowadays, I think that's what's given rise to this fake practice of vinyasa flow, is because the teacher choreographs it, or you choreograph your own. What? Why are you choreographing your own practice? Why? That's not okay. Because when you are left to choreograph your own practice, you're only doing what feels good, what you like to do, what builds your
Yeah.
ego.
And what you know, you're not learning what you don't know.
Yeah, your
And
teacher should be designing a practice that brings you to the place of challenge.
yes, and the point of going to a teacher is to learn what you don't know and to be pointed out the areas that you need to improve on where you're weak.
Right. And that's why people would rather go to a 200-hour teacher training course, which cost more money than going to India,
Wow.
because it's the ego. They
Mhm.
don't want to be humble. They can't let go. They want to be somebody. They want to be, he even talked about that, like with the teachers, like if you're somebody, like, especially in the yoga world, if you're just trying to be a famous yoga teacher, you're not a yoga teacher. A lot of really good yoga teachers have gotten famous over the years for their incredible teachings,
Mhm.
but they're doing their teachings like when Todd was first authorized many years ago before yoga was big. He's like 11 years older than me. I always remind him of that. So I was still in middle school when this happened, but but I don't want to start any rumors. I did not know him then. Did not know him. He did not know him then. But I only met him as an adult. But
Yeah.
he when he came back from India, because he was one of the few people who had trained or learned under Patabi Joyce, he was offered these gigs of traveling around the world teaching like weekend workshops, which seems fun. And a lot of teachers do this. They travel around the world, they teach. I've done that a few times, teach these workshops, but some of these teachers become workshop teachers. So that's all they do, is they travel around the world teaching workshops. And and they make a lot of money doing that. And that's what Todd started doing. And then he had this like come to Jesus moment one day where he was like, wait a minute, I don't actually have students. I have participants that come to my workshops, but I don't have students, because
Mhm.
I don't want to do this. I want to have a home shala with actual students that I get to know, that I can work with,
Mhm.
that I can help every day.
Yeah.
So even in that, that's the difference between service to self and service to others, right?
Yes, because that's a difference between just briefly appearing to somebody seeming amazing because of his qualifications and all of that kind of thing, whereas actually dedicated and working with just a few people. And that's why,
Individual.
like, even with our academy, like I quite like that, it's not really huge, so that we can really help, help people in a more, I don't know, intimate might not be,
One-on-one, yeah.
yeah, you know what I
One-on-one, it's a
mean.
lot. And that's important for me. That's why, like, we're doing these exercise videos, I keep asking people, like, what do you feel like you need? Because I need to
Yeah.
know what it is that I'm not teaching them. There's a great, let me find the quote from Krishmacharya um in this book. I
And,
know that
and
I paraphrase it a lot, but I don't know it fully. Let's see here. It's right
it's
here.
like that with my meditations too. Like, I mean, I have so much fun creating them, and I have quite a few ideas of ones I want to do, but I also like to hear from what people and what they want, what they need help with.
How can I help you? That's the
Mhm.
I've already been helped. I have my own teachers. How
Hmm.
can I though be of service to you?
Yeah.
He says to be a teacher, teach what is in you, not as it applies to you, to yourself, but as it applies to the other,
Mm.
as it applies to the other,
Hmm.
right? And so for me, like, and that again, with the law of one, looking at the yoga world, like you can't become a yoga teacher in 200 hours. You don't have the enough experience to create that wisdom.
Yeah.
You have to have the lived experience yourself of going through these teachings and having your ass kicked multiple times and having that dark night of the soul so that it is in you. But
Yeah.
then teach what is in you. So that's in me. But when I meet a beginner, I have to pull what's in me as it applies to the beginner
Hmm.
or as it applies to the person that's been practicing for years but is switching lineages.
Hmm.
And that is why I think so many people though, Paula, that's why the law of one is so important, because regardless of whether it's the yoga community or the truther community or the medical community or the whatever community it is, when you are strictly feeding the ego, which is the false sense of self, then you're serving the self and not the other.
Hmm.
And I think so many people now, with that being said, martyrdom is also a negative polarity. So you do have to do
Yes.
an energy exchange. Absolutely, you should be paying your teachers. Absolutely, because there has to be, you can't just enslave your teacher to you,
Yeah.
right? Or feed off of your teacher without giving them, it's an equal, I give to you, you give to me, and then we go about that's equal, that's equality, right? And so I think that's where a lot of manipulation has come in spirituality, is that people truly believe that a spiritual teacher should just offer, just should
All for free.
sacrifice their lives.
But also I feel like there's a lack of appreciation when people offer too much for free.
Absolutely, it cheapens the work. People, you value what you pay for, and I tell you, I pay for my tuition in India.
Yeah.
Trust, before you get there, you pay your tuition.
Hmm.
You know, and it's good for the Americans, I will say, and for the Australians and the people from the rest of the world, because you're transferring it to rupees, and so it's a lot cheaper for us than for like the Indians.
Right. Yeah.
But it's still a value. It's still a value that we're,
But you're
but I
still
guess
paying, of course, and
you're
you
still
still
paying.
had to work hard for that. But
Yeah,
also just
and
going back to the Dark Night of the Soul bit, like I just kind of feel like it just got me thinking about that show you recommended. We watched the Apple Cider Vinegar show. And I mean, I'm only up to the very beginning bit of it, but I noticed when she was kind of pretending that she had been through things when she's talking to people, like she hasn't actually really been through chemotherapy and stuff like that. And I think when you haven't actually been through a dark night of the soul yourself, you don't have real compassion for people, like a real genuine, because you haven't actually experienced that suffering yourself. So I mean, like, and I just feel like that's really valuable because, and people can feel that, like they can sense whether you're just being fake or whether you actually genuinely feel compassion for what someone's pain that they've gone through. And
absolutely.
yeah, and that's huge because I mean, like I haven't, experienced some things that some people have gone through terrible things, but from what I have experienced, man, like I just feel for people so much and just that's why I don't like watching the news because I just spend the whole time crying.
Well, and it helps you too, like as you're saying, like I'm thinking about too, like when you're going through the act of change, the alchemy of change, it's painful and it's hard. And if your teacher has done it before you, has already been through it, they're able to not only have compassion, but be tough when they need to be tough.
Yes,
And
that's
you
important
can,
too because they know it's for your highest good to go through
and they
it.
know they can just get through. And I think when the
Mhm.
student knows that the teacher's been through it and they're being tough with you, it's easier to
Yeah.
surrender to the teacher and to hold their hand because you trust them. I got
Yes.
emotional. Descatar was talking about the trust you have in your teacher. And I was that way with David Garrigues, still am. Like David Garrigues, my original teacher before I went over to India. And that's the thing too. It's not, there is a conversation. You have a conversation with the person, will you be my teacher? There is a conver that has to happen. It's not just showing up to someone's class. And that is evident in a traditional yoga. That's not evident in contemporary yoga, but that is very much a part. That's a no-brainer in traditional yoga. And even though I lived in Atlanta, he's in Philadelphia. I would fly back and forth to Philadelphia. It's only like an hour flight. I would text him all the time. He was constantly keeping in touch with me, working me through my life, things that were happening in my life. And I say all the time, I don't know if I've said this on the YouTube, but I have said this in my classes. Like when I was the years that I was with David, I was always sore. I was always extremely sore, but I was never injured. And
Yes.
I had a trust in him. I would even to this day, I would trust David with my life.
Yeah.
He's never once in the years that I have known him, almost 2 decades now, like not once has that man faltered. Not once has he ever hurt me in class. Not once has he ever hurt me in my life.
Mm-hmm.
He's never lied to me, and he has asked me to do some very hard things. I mean, I have a picture from probably like 10 years ago of me strapped up with blocks in between my legs to a pads in a very deep back bend. I'm drenched in sweat, and David's standing there smiling down, and that picture was actually used a lot for advertisement. But it
Wow.
looks like a gnarly contraption, and I'm drenched in sweat, but I allowed myself to be. And I remember that day. I remember it. Oh, it was a long day of work. And that was the very end of the day. I was the last person there. And I remember that day, but I never faltered. I never said no, even though I was tired, because I trusted him. And
Yeah.
even if he told me, if he's coming to Atlanta soon to teach a workshop at AYA. And when he's here, if he says, Brice, you can go walk on that lake, you'll be fine. I would trust him.
Mm-hmm.
I'd try to go walk on the lake because and he was tough though. Like you didn't say no to him. Like he was a tough teacher, but he knew what he was doing. He cared.
Yes.
And
And
that's
if you knew
important.
that if he was pushing you, it was because he genuinely understood you and understood what your body could handle and you as a person as well. And I mean, I think that's another difference between the more traditional yoga and the other yoga is that, you know, there seems to be more of a relationship being built. It's not just kind of just a one-off class that you go to. The people that are practicing traditional yoga, that's a lifelong commitment. You know, they're there
Absolutely.
for the
Life, yeah.
long
You are
haul.
there
They're
to
not
change
just
their
there
life.
like, oh, I feel like doing yoga this week and next week I'll do running and whatever. It's like, no, we're there every day, you know,
Yeah.
or however many days.
And you're right. Just David knew in those times when I was like shaking and he told me to do it again,
Hmm.
there was an obstacle, mostly mental, because the
Yeah.
body responds to the mental that he needed me to push through. And sometimes when you get to that point of total exhaustion, there is no more ego left.
Yeah.
There is no more expectation left. And once that drops, that's when the breakthrough happens.
Mhm.
But he was able, because of his own experiences, he was able to see that even though I was shaking and exhausted and covered in sweat, that I was ready. And that if I were to slip and fall, if my body were to give out, he would be there to catch me.
Mhm.
You know, I would tell a story. I'm not going to give out names in this, but there was another student that David had been working with for a very long time. And with drop back stand up, where you drop back into it, that's a big part of Ashtanga. It takes a long time for people to learn to get the confidence to do that without hitting their head. Some people do hit their
Yeah.
heads.
Wow.
And when you get to a certain point in second series, you're expected to just be able to do it.
Yeah.
And this particular student had gone to another teacher for like this big workshop, and she was practicing, and the teacher kind of got on to her like, why aren't you drop back standing up? And she goes, oh, David helps me with the drop back stand up. And he kind of yelled at her, and he's like, you can do it by yourself. And she hit her head multiple times. The teacher wasn't there to catch her. Well, it turns out that the reason why David wasn't having her drop back stand up is because she has lupus. And so he
Oh,
knew that
geez.
that particular motion, that she could do the deep back bending from the floor, but to stand up and drop back, her body was not going to be able to respond as quickly as someone who did not have that big of an autoimmune. Like I have some autoimmune disorder issues. I've got some arthritis, but lupus is a big one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he was supporting her where she literally needed the support. And David actually ended up calling that teacher and chewing him out, like, your responsibility is to keep these people safe. And,
Yeah.
not everybody's the same. And just because someone might appear to be healthy doesn't mean they are.
Yeah.
And she's my student. And if she told you that I have been helping her, and this is David is a senior teacher to this other teacher, you should have trusted what I was having her do
Mhm.
for a reason. And now you've set her back, her health back. But you see, that's the thing too. It's like your teacher has to care. Like I was
Yeah.
telling you in this book, I lost it, bawling, crying, where Jessica Char is talking about the scientific studies on yoga, and we still don't quite have all the answers as to why yoga works so well with people, like why people. And he basically, throughout the gist of the manuscript, says it's mostly has to do with faith. The faith that people have is kind of
Right.
his, what it kind of,
Yeah.
he doesn't come out and say that, but that's kind of what I think his, what he kind of hints at.
Interesting. Yeah.
But he said, people, when people come to our shala and say, can you help me? The only answer I can give you is I can care.
Mhm.
I can care. But whether this helps you or not really comes down to you. But I can care for you as the individual. And that's what Krishnamacharya used to teach. So when you take these group classes, and I try to, like at Sacred Garden on Sunday mornings where I teach, I try to do that Ashtanga class as a workshop anyway, because I'm trying the best I can to treat each individual depending on their needs in this bigger class environment. Because even though it is a group class, because of my training, I, as teacher, take this very seriously. I like to joke around and have fun and do deep dives on missing body parts of famous people who lived a long time ago, like the Talawaki of Rasputin. Like, I think that's funny. But when it comes to like yoga, I take that very
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
Because these people, and I even said this, I know you haven't, I said this in one of those, like, thank you guys for trusting me, for putting your trust in me because that trust needs to be there. And we had some questions about that in our last group call. And it's like, you have to listen to your gut. And your gut is not, oh, this teacher is too strict. No, you really need to go in your gut, because sometimes the teacher that you think is too strict is actually the one that you need. And he even said in this, he was like,
Ah,
does the teacher trigger you? Then that's your teacher,
wow.
you
Interesting.
know. But the law of one, that's and the studying the law of one kind of helps you not just, I'm using yoga as an example because that's the world that I know the best outside of everything else,
Mhm.
gives you a template of how to understand your own gut instinct, like service to self, service to others. And and really see beyond, yeah, people can tell you anything. People can tell you they're a truther. They can tell you they're a Christian. They can tell you all these things, but is that the truth? We were talking, it is complicated because in the law of one, they're very clear that all religions are negatively polarized.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that everybody in that religion is negatively polarized.
Yeah.
So there is some complication there. There's some complexity there. And why religions would be negatively polarized, I'll answer that question right away. It's very simple. Anything that has a pecking order.
Yeah.
And when I mean pecking order, I don't mean like, obviously, for example, obviously in the world of yoga, I am pretty high up because of my experience, but that does not mean that my human life is more valuable than a beginner's. That's the difference. And when you're on the service to, like, look at Mr. T. He's been elected to be a leader of the free world, not just the United States. The president of the United States is titled what? The leader of the free world. His presidency impacts Paula in Australia, impacts Canada, impacts Europe, the free world, right? But that does not mean that he is more important than you watching right now. And he knows that. You see him behave in that way.
Yeah.
He takes his job as a service to you. He is, even though he's got all this power now, he's using that in service, well, right now to the American people, to be of service to the American people. That's the difference. So for me in my yoga room, even though I'm the one with the most authority in that room,
Mhm.
because I'm the authorized one, my authority should not be abused.
Yeah.
It should be used to serve you. What can I do to serve you? And then when we walk out of that yoga room, I'm no longer your teacher. I'm just Brice.
Yeah.
And I don't control you outside of that room. Right. So that's the difference. So when you go, and that's one thing I think with the truth of the world too, that people have to be very careful about, because just as the negative side has elite bloodlines, the truther side is also believing in this idea of elite bloodlines. Oh, I mean, I think I told you this once, Paula, when that conspiracy was going around that I was Princess Diana in a mask, first I thought it was funny, and then it fucking pissed me off because I was like, why do I have to be somebody famous to do something extraordinary? Like, why do I have to be of a certain That so discredits just I'm just a normal person. I'm a nobody, just like Ram Dass says, I'm a nothing. But I'm doing like, does that make sense? Like that made me mad. I was like, no, to research the missing books of the Bible, to do this research, anybody can do it.
Yeah,
Anybody can do it.
absolutely. Yeah.
You don't have to be royalty. You
Mhm.
don't have to be royalty to be a part of this revolution. In fact, in my opinion, of studying the law of one, the reason why we're course correcting right now is because of the people of the world, not because of Trump. He plays his part, but he
Yeah,
only got his part because of us.
that's right. Because
So if
we
you're someone
listened to
that
him.
thinks that you have to be someone famous to do something extraordinary, then that's a negative belief.
Mhm.
You believe now in elitism. Elitism, Elohim, that's all those elevator to elevate. Jordan Maxwell went into that. The
Yes, that's right.
elite. That is the worship of the Elohim.
Hmm. And I think that's even relates to people thinking that they don't have the power within themselves to heal themselves because they think that they have to have some special abilities. And I mean, look, that held me back. I've been wanting to be a healer for years, for like probably 16 years I've been wanting to do it, to do healing work. I just never had the confidence to do it, and I didn't know which was the right kind of modality for me. But also I just thought, well, I can't see spirits, and I haven't had any intense experiences or anything, so I just never thought that I was kind of special enough to do healing work for people. Um, but I also kind of feel like with the law of one and the Cassiopeans, it's like and traditional yoga, it's like this kind of balance between, realizing that yes, you are a powerful being, that you do have the power to heal yourself, and we have a lot of incredible abilities that need to be developed, that can be developed and worked on, but also being humble at the same time, and not going ahead of yourself and thinking, yes, okay, I'm an amazing person who has great abilities, but I need to work hard to develop those abilities. I mean, yes, some people come born with, gifts of being able to see people and communicate with spirits quite easily and things like that. But for the rest of us, we just have to work hard at it. And if we do actually work hard at it, then we can develop them. I mean, I feel like my abilities are still quite subtle compared to what I would like them to be, but they've, definitely increased, especially in the last couple of years. And I think also that's part of the veil thinning as well. But like, with your yoga, I mean, you have worked so damn hard at doing what you can do. But anybody can do that, and if
Yeah,
they're
anybody
willing
can.
to put
Yeah.
in the work. So I think it's just really, so I think it's when we've got these people that are kind of saying, well, I'm special because I can do certain things that other people can't. And it's like, that's when the ego gets in the way. So I think it's just this really important balance of realizing that, yes, you are an incredible being, but you still have to be humble and work hard to get that. It's not going to just be handed to you. And I think that's something that a lot of truthers kind of mislead people with as well, saying that there's just going to be one day you're just going to wake up and you're going to have all these superhuman abilities and you're going to be able to, do all
No,
kinds of crazy stuff.
absolutely. You have to earn it. You have
Yeah,
to earn it.
yeah,
It's
I
just
think
like
we
the
do.
Zara thing pisses me off sometimes. I'm like, I've seen so many groups where they talk about, they're going broke because they're waiting for, like, why are you doing that to yourself? That's communism. You think somebody's going to come around and just give you money? Like, you know, we get stimulus checks, but you think someone's just going to walk up and like give you $1 million and that's that?
No.
Like, we see that with this whole phenomenon around the med beds, which you guys, med beds are not good. They're not of the light. They're not you have to sell your soul. There's whistleblowers who've talked about this. Med bed technology, you have to give something up in order to get into that bed, and that is your
Oh,
soul.
wow.
Because immortality is of the dark side.
But it's just
Negative.
another magic pill, really,
Yeah,
and what is your soul going to learn if you hop into a med bed
exactly.
and you're just going to get magically fixed? You're not going to learn anything. But if you actually do the work and change your diet, change your thought processes, do exercise, do practice meditation and visualizations and things to help heal your body, that
To
how
find out what
much
the root of the
growth is
problem
going to come
is.
from that?
And actually, Jessica Char speaks about that's the biggest difference and problem between allopathic medicine and traditional medicine.
Hmm.
Allopathic medicine is great for emergency situations, right? Emergency situations, you need to go to a hospital, right? Appendicitis, you got to go to the hospital. Break your leg, you got to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
But they're just slapping a band-aid on the issue.
Yeah, they're not getting to the core problem. And majority of the time, the core problem is usually an emotional issue that needs to be
Your
healed.
mind.
Yeah.
Look at like weight loss. I mean, I can't tell you what makes me mad, Paula, is I get so many people telling me, "Oh, it's easy for you to say because you're fit and skinny." I'm fit and skinny because I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning for 19 years and do 2 hours worth of an extremely hard practice 6 days a week.
Yeah, you're fit and
I
skinny
watch
because
what
you
I
work your
eat.
butt off and you're
That's
you're
why at
you're a very
42.
disciplined eater too. I mean, you're a lot better than me, I have to
Well, and I
say.
think for me and I will say being a disciplined eater, that's my digestion issues, but it's also like when you
Yes.
do exercise a lot, you start to realize how much food impacts you. And so
Yeah.
eating healthy starts to become more important because you feel better when you exercise. That's a totally different,
Oh,
but it's like, so
absolutely. And even the effects of alcohol and stuff as well, because then you
yeah,
start to realize, oh, when I wake up and after even just having one glass of wine, I feel a bit groggy. And it's kind of like, oh, maybe I'll miss that tonight and
what's
wake
the
up and
choice
feel
I
better.
want to make? Do I want
Yeah.
to, yeah, exactly. It's choices. And
Mhm.
so you're telling me that you deserve, if you're a little overweight, just to hop in a bed and get skinny when people like me have actually worked our whole
Been
lives
working
to be like
really hard.
this.
Yeah.
And work to figure out our own shit. If you're overweight, that's nothing to be ashamed of. That's just where you have karma.
Yeah.
That's just where you have your work. There's something going on in your mind that is causing you to overeat. And what is that? Because if you don't get to that issue, then
Well,
you're
it's
then
just
getting
the
in that
weight's
band
just going to come back on again anyway.
exactly. It's never unless you actually are people who are underweight. Who have
Yeah.
I get that way
Yeah.
sometimes. I have to face that. Like, why do I have the propensity to stop eating?
Hmm.
What's going on where I don't, so I have to I've had to self-reflect, but that's that pratyahara, the controlling of the senses through self-reflection. A lot of people can't do that. A lot of
And
people cannot self-reflect.
it's
They
even
won't do
like that with the C word as well. I mean, plenty of people have had surgery only for it all to grow back again
exactly.
because they haven't worked to the root cause of the problem. Yeah.
Exactly. 100%. And so it is really, and that's why people the truthers get so mad at me is because I'm like, this is your response, is me telling you this is your responsibility. You
Mhm.
have to be responsible for yourself. You have to take control of yourself. You have to start to be a productive member of your own community. But
Yes.
no one wants to do that. Everybody wants to be rescued
Yeah.
because I feel like and I don't know, Paul, if it's the rising of like the social media aspect where we have this rise of narcissism and entitlement, if that's what it is. But I will tell you, working in the slums of India, I have seen the happiest children
Yeah.
who literally have nothing to their name.
Hmm.
And then I see Americans who have the whole world at their fingertips and they're
And
miserable.
yeah. Yeah. And sometimes too much choice is just too overwhelming as well.
So whittle it back. Get to know yourself.
Yeah.
Start journaling, figuring out who you are. You
Hmm.
know, and that is the thing too. When you're humble, we are powerful beings, but we also know that we're also nothing at the same time.
Yes.
It gives us that ability to have discernment and to question our own thoughts and to question our own belief systems.
Hmm.
Because a belief system is of the mind. That's all it is. It's of the mind. Guess what happens when you die?
Yeah. That it's
The
all
belief
just
system goes with
disappears.
the mind.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, I guess we should save for the next interview with Todd and Law of One where we're taking questions because it's like
Yes.
vast material. And so, if you guys have any questions, if you're part of the academy and you have any questions
We would
about the Law
love
of
to
One,
hear them. Yes. Any for the Law of One or the Cassiopeians. We would love for you to email them through or share them in the community section of the website so that we can ask Todd.
yeah. And if you want to join you're going to have a link below for the academy. If you want to join the academy,
Yeah.
guys, we have so many. We were just laughing offline. We're like the least culty people there
Yeah.
is because we're having so many teachers come on board. Only master teachers. We're only letting master teachers come on of different disciplines so that you have a plethora of different theories and lineages to look at to try to help yourself. And even though it's tough, like they're just because I always say, just because it's tough, just because it's tough doesn't mean it can't be fun. And just because it's
That's
tough
right.
doesn't mean it isn't worth it. It's okay to be uncomfortable. That's what spirituality is. If you're going to a teacher that makes you feel comfortable all the time, you're not in a spiritual class, you're in an ego class. A
Yeah.
spiritual class is really uncomfortable.
And I love that you include that in some of the exercises because some of them there are just it starts getting really uncomfortable and then I hear you saying that and I'm like, yep, yep, it's okay to be uncomfortable.
It,
Just get
it
through
just because it's tough doesn't mean it can't be fun. Doesn't mean you can't laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
And Richard Freeman, a really famous Ashtanga teacher, he says in one of his videos from like the 90s, he says, in order to practice Ashtanga yoga, you need two things. Two things. The ability to laugh at yourself and to have a good time. Because it's so
Oh,
hard. If you come in too
yeah.
serious, it's gonna make you even more karma. But you got to be able to laugh at yourself with some of this stuff because it is. There's one transition from the primary series that I teach on, and we've been working on it at Sacred Garden. It takes like 10 years to really get it, but
Wow.
at one point I'm like, just make it back to Chaturanga, and they just start laughing because it's just such a hard transition. It's so anyway. So it's yeah, you gotta laugh at yourself. And you gotta have fun. So yeah.
And also, I just wanted to add in about that you've added a little alchemist class for
Yes.
for the little
Yes.
kids that are a part of the academy because we do have some little ones. And my little Scarlett and I did the little alchemist class together, the Shake It Off with Taylor Swift. And Scarlett absolutely loved it, by the way. She thought it
Oh,
was so much
good.
fun. And we were just dancing together and it was the best fun. So she really,
Good,
really
good. Well,
loved that.
we're gonna do another one with my niece as well because we do have
Yeah.
this is like for 10 and under kids, you guys. And just before, if any of us any questions, you're not a part of the academy, but you got kids, they're under the age of 10. Let them have fun. Let them play. Don't try to, if they want to put a costume on and do yoga, let them do that. Like, don't try to
Yeah.
correct them. They're so young. Their chakras aren't even done being developed yet. Like, let them have a healthy relationship with this work so that when the work does get hard, when they're adults, they have a healthy relationship with it. So, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
awesome. I'm glad you liked it. I had fun. I felt like kind of an idiot dancing, but I was like, no, it's
Oh
fun.
no,
It's
it was awesome. We loved it. We were shaking it off.
fun. So,
Oh, awesome. All right, well, we are going to head off, but thank you for chatting to me about this, Brice. And we'll be sharing a little promo about interview of Todd.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll send it to you. I've just cut it. So yeah,
Oh,
the interview's
perfect.
already up on the website, you guys, the Esoteric Academy, but we're going to show
Yeah.
a preview soon here on YouTube. So,
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Thank you, Brice. And we'll chat to you again next week.
bye
Bye.
guys.